guys, welcome to Rise and Grind podcast. It's me, Alex, with my girl Danielle. We are here on episode 14, my favorite number, and here to talk all things. I wouldn't say weather related. I would say it's a method of staying motivated through the elements. Maybe that's how we kind of spin it. It's on our mind because obviously, Danielle, you live in Washington, Seattle specifically, where it's kind of rain and gloom and a lot of months of the year. I'm down here in Dallas where it's like 20 degrees, so it's real cold. But I think overall, there is such a thing as like not weather depression. What do they call it? But it's like where your moods shift with the actual weather, like it is actually truly affected by the weather.
I don't know what it's called, but I know that I bought these like lights that like replicate like what the sunshine looks like, and they're just a little bit of extra pep. Just sitting here feeling like I'm just getting this
like the glow from the sun. Yeah,
just bright. We need bright. I'm telling you, these last couple weeks, like I said to you, which is what intrigued me to want to like talk about these things. It's because it's been 37 to 43 degrees here, and it has just been raining almost every single day for the last 2 weeks. So it's like we don't have the options to go outside and train unless you're playing soccer. Soccer is different, but still. So yeah, it was on my mind to at least like open up the can of worms to have the conversations of what that's like for parents that are trying to kind of help navigate this process and help their kids. And then more importantly, once you get to that age as a kid, when you're starting to train, like to push through what these types of winter days, when the season still seems 7, 8, 9 weeks away until you're really going to get out and play, like how to do that. So it's not easy.
No. And I think it's part of the reason why they and maybe this is just like not me just not knowing, but it's my understanding that a lot of the reason why they put the sports in specific seasons was because like softball is an outdoor sport, softball and baseball, so they need to be played in the spring and the summer. Fall's fine, but like that's why they don't play over the winter. It's why in California, at least back when I was in high school, the CIF, like that's their like interscholastic like league thing, overarching administration, whatever. It's why they selected certain sports in certain seasons. So it was like you can play basketball in the winter because it's indoors. You can still play soccer in the winter because you can play on turf even in the rain, right? So it's like I think they try and help with that, but playing soccer outside in 37-degree weather or 20-degree weather right now, like that's not fun. Like it's a different level of having to push your body to like rise above what it's feeling, to like really focus. Like it takes mind power to just get into practice and like play and do all that stuff. And then to have to also dedicate it to like not thinking about things you can't control, like the weather. I think it's a lot to ask of these kids, in my opinion.
It's a lot to ask. And I think parents start to realize real quick if their kids really want to do it or not, like we gave Audrey the choice yesterday if she wanted to go to basketball or soccer, and then Wednesday we'll switch, and she wanted to go to soccer, and it was like cold as hell out there. And I'm like, kudos to you, sweetheart. Like you want to go out there and train and go do that. Like good for you. I'd want to be in that warm gym. But I also am older. So I do feel like it's harder when you're older to be outside, like in the cold. When you're little and you're kind of running around with your friends, it's completely different. So I don't know. I kind of wrote some different things down that like I remember throughout my process of doing it. I definitely had, a parent. My dad was definitely more of like a pusher, not in like a bad way, but like would kind of push you past your comfort zone when you wanted to bail, when you wanted to not do it because it was cold or you didn't want to get up. And I mean, my 5 years of high school, because we go from grade 8 through grade 12 in Canada, was like my ass got up every single day at 6 or 6:30 a.m. to get to the school at 7 a.m. to shoot with our basketball team because the PE teacher was our coach from the 5th grade, 6th grade, all through high school. So like we would get up, and I still remember my dad's yell in the morning to like get us up, not like in a bad way, but it would be like, all right, time to get up. And I would just be like, shit, I got to do this again. And it's so hard, but I don't think that I would have done the things that I would have done if I didn't have him kind of pushing me
Yeah.
and like helping me with those things. So I was grateful to be able to like have that extra push, which did make a big difference for me.
Yeah. And I think it's so funny. Me and Mike were just talking about this yesterday because we're trying to get, we have Penelope in her regular soccer, but then we also have her doing skills, which is like more of a one-on-one with the ball. And then we also have her doing like performance training, which is like strength and agility and conditioning and stuff. And then we have Dominic going to baseball, and then he's doing football training. And he's like, are we pushing them too much? And I said, honestly, like looking back, I wish I had more of that, because I know that if somebody had been pushing me in that way, and maybe that's like kind of what you had, but I know I didn't. Like I had to motivate myself. I had to get myself to places, and my parents didn't do any of the extra stuff, like in terms of like training or getting, individual lessons or anything like that. So it's like to know that if that would have been an option, like how much better could I have been? Right? Like how much more could I have accomplished potentially? And it's not like I don't regret it. I mean, I'm good. Like I've said this before, like I'm good with the way that my career ended and all that stuff. But you want to know at the end of like when your kids grow up that you've done everything you could possibly do to help them be the best athletes they can be. And so I feel like that's kind of where we're at. It's like we're just trying to give them all the opportunities we can and do it in a way that keeps them motivated about it and not want to quit and never come back. So
yeah. And it's funny, I say this all the time. I talk about it a lot. If you're driven on motivation, that's going to run out. It has to be so much deeper than that, because to constantly find motivation from other people and not have that sense of purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing, the burnout is a real thing. And that's why the importance of taking the right steps throughout the process of like the dark days. It's like, okay, these are the things that I know that I'm able to rely on to get me through. And when I can do that, I'm able to push past that point. So, I mean, I was a big planner. I'm not someone that's going to plan out 365 days of the year, but I do know when I was going back and doing the Olympics stuff, like I was really big on, okay, hey, this morning I'm taking the kids to school. I know that I have to go do my lift. I know that I have to go to DBAT to go get my bullpen in. Obviously, everything was sent from Team Canada as far as our lift and stuff like that. But like my bullpens were on my own. So like I was so big on like, I don't have a catcher 80% of the time in the winter. Like I'm throwing into the 9-screen net, like no one else in DBAT. I'm there by myself. Like it sucked. But I knew that if I set up the plan of like, okay, hey, today on the 9-screen, we're going to go up and in for the first 5 minutes. And then up and away for the next 5. And then we're going to combo and go down and in. Every single bullpen brought something different to the table for me to be able to focus on. And I say this and I stress this to like a lot of the athletes that I give lessons to Tuesdays, like when you're not here with me and you're throwing on your own, you can't just go throw to throw. We need to go with a plan, like what the plan of attack is for you today. What pitch are you going to work on? What adrenaline level are you going to run on? Because a game provides a different type of adrenaline. And when you throw in a bullpen, it's kind of relaxed. It's not as hardcore. Your heart rate's not through the roof. And so I'll challenge a lot of them to like, a couple weeks ago, I said like, hey, I want you guys to do like 5-minute increments where you are throwing like you're in a game, like you are balls to the wall. We are throwing it like we're trying to throw it hard, because that's what you do when you're in a game competition. Like you want to beat them, but when you're in a bullpen sometimes working on things, which we all should, it's a different feel.
Yeah.
And I want the bullpen stuff to be able to show up in the game. We can't just expect to be able to, when the moment's really big and the pressure feels thick, if I haven't practiced that type of like throwing good quality pitches and trying to feel those moments, they don't just interlock and work when you want them to. So I am a big believer in like planning what your workouts are. So it's like outside of what your team practice is, this is all simply stuff that's outside of team, because when you're with team, they're telling you what to do. But when you have stuff on the side and it's like, hey, on Tuesday, Thursday, I'm going to set up time where I go to the cages for an hour. Okay, what are you going to go do? You're just going to show up and wing it? So I'm a big believer in that. I think it's so important to kind of plan that out, have that checklist, write it down. and go from there, because then you have something to look at.
Yeah.
Gets you through it, and you have to hold yourself accountable. That's a whole other thing. And sometimes that's where parents can come into play when they're a little bit younger. But when you are 14, 15, 16, sometimes you have to give yourself that little extra push to continue to keep going.
Well, and that carries into the weather thing too, because it's like if you're out there practicing in cold or in rain or in situations that you don't always face, who's to say that's not going to happen during a real game? And if you know that you've had the practice and the preparation in that same scenario, you can mentally go to that place. And so that's why it's so important to like be able to plan that stuff out. It's like, I know it's real cold out there right now, but we have a tournament in a week and it's going to be the same weather. So we have to get out there and we have to feel what that feels like to have your lungs burning and everything else tingling. And I can't feel my toes, but I have to kick the ball and I have to, and getting yourself in that mindset is so important. Like I think about like my own routines when I'm like working out or like I have to I have to work out. Like it's just something I have to do. And I know that when it gets cold, I have a really hard time getting out of bed and going and working out in the garage because that's cold. Like it's not fun. It's not an enjoyable thing for me. So I already know that when it gets cold, I shift my workouts to later in the day because I still need it, but I know I can't be successful at that time of day. And that sort of is like where you try and like start. I mean, as we get older, like kids might not have as many options, but I think there is a way to like give yourself not the grace, but the flexibility to like do what works for you. And when that changes, be okay with that change. Like you just have to know your body and you have to know yourself. And I think it's hard as kids to know what that is. But as parents is like, when your kid's successful too, like, what's going to put them in that right mindset. If it's, hearing your dad's voice in the morning to wake you up. Like for us, like I carry the speaker upstairs and we start blasting music at 6:30 a.m. because that's how they like to wake up, and they wake up and they're in a good mood because we're jamming out to whatever it is. But that's how I know I can get them moving is I got to carry got to carry the charge upstairs and blast the 70s music. It's what works for them. And I think as parents, we have to be really attuned to that and understand, like, if our kid is struggling in a moment, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, what are all the things contributing to that, right? Did they get a good night's sleep last night? Did they have a full breakfast? Like those things affect their little bodies so much that we forget about it. Like sometimes we get so wrapped up in our routines too, that we're like, shoot, I forgot they've been out of school for 2 weeks. So they don't remember like having that routine. Like I feel bad for the teachers this week because like I'm sure it's just a shit show, just like the beginning of school, right? Like you have to get them back into all those routines again. The same thing for coaches is like you take time off over the holidays, you got to get those kids back into shape. And a lot of them don't do a whole lot.
I know.
They're not out there conditioning. They're not out there still getting reps in. And so it's almost like starting from scratch again. And so as parents, we can support in number one, hoping that they want to go do those extra reps, but also in, how can I help my kid be as successful as possible when they get to practice? How do we mentally prepare them to like jump back in and get going again? I mean, it's crazy to think about, like they're humans. Like we worry about it so much when they're babies, right? Like their schedules and their eating habits and all this stuff. And then you kind of like start to lag off a little bit, but my kid's sitting there like eating Oreos after school. And I'm like, that's not an okay snack. Like you relax a little bit and then they take 500 yards away and they just like run with it. And it's like, okay, we got to like recenter here for a second. And it's hard to be that involved. We kind of talked about this last time. Like our kids are lucky that we care so much.
Yeah. No, this whole thing is hard. It's hard being someone that's gone through it ourselves. And then it's hard to be able to kind of help our kids through this process with also being able to pump the brakes or when we need to go pedal to the metal, because you want the love of the game to still stay there. And that's always like, there's definitely times where I was burnt out as a kid. And it's not a bad thing. Sports kept me out of a lot of other shit. They kept me out of trouble. They kept me on the straight and narrow. Not sure life would be what it is for me right now without staying down that path. So you are going to have those moments where your kids don't want to do things and you have to push them. And I know we've talked about this. And at the end of the day, like there are times where I have had to push Maddie to do things when she hasn't wanted to do it, but it's built this different level of confidence in her to know that I can do it when I don't want to. And I
Mhm.
think that is a skill set that you're able to carry on for so many other things. And I mean, other things that kind of worked throughout this process for me, I was big on like a goal a week. And then I was big on like a really big goal, like kind
Mhm.
of in like 5 or 6 month thing. And like, I don't know, this worked really well for like our family growing up. My brother and I trained a lot together. Whether it was basketball, whether it was baseball, softball, all the things. And like my dad was really kind of big on that reward system. And it was like, hey, if we go, and it wasn't every single training session, but it's like,
Mhm.
especially on the days where you're tired and you don't want to go, hey, like we were big on in Canada, we call them Slurpees. They're like slushies. If for those listening, if you have not had a Canadian Slurpee, you are fully missing out. It's nothing. It's
So
like
it's not the
nothing that
same
you've
as
ever.
like a 7-Eleven Slurpee.
Yeah, it's not. It is the goats of all goats.
Okay.
So that was always the driving motivation. Like if we went and we had a good workout and we pushed ourselves and like we didn't bicker and fight and we got after it, like on the way home, we would always get that. And like not every single session, but like to me, the reward system, if you use it properly, is like a cool thing because it's still giving you those reps and putting you in that position to do it maybe when you don't feel as motivated. Um, and then you're also like, cool, this is awesome. I get something from it. And then
Yeah.
that taught me the older I got, and then when I got to the, college, when it started to be like, hey, what's the shit that I'm doing when no one is watching? Because what's
Yeah.
expected is what's expected. But my competitive advantage was always I'm doing more, I'm doing more, I'm doing
Mhm.
more. And I was someone that still would reward myself. Be like, hey, what's the goal this week? The goal is, I need to do this Monday, make sure I get the extra cardio in, and then I got to get 2 additional bullpens and then sit down and talk with, my pitching coach about XYZ. Boom. Sometimes I'd go to Lululemon and pick myself something out. Or sometimes I'd go get myself a nice coffee. But I don't know. I think that that is something that has always helped kind of drive me a little bit. And it doesn't have to be some big bougie thing. It could be the smallest little thing that your kid likes that they're
Enjoys.
just like,
Yeah.
and it could be like a surprise gift. It's like, hey, at the end of the couple weeks when these kids are really grinding, like get them
Yeah.
and I know it's after Christmas and everyone's getting gifts and kids, it can be a lot for them, but I think there's this thing that you can give them that's sentimental and it just let them know like, hey, you've been really working hard and I think that you deserve this. Continue to keep doing what you're doing. And then it allows your kid to see that. And that's almost like the coach's mentality, right? Like
Mhm.
you hear your coaches give you that feedback of like, I'm proud of you, you're doing a good job, makes you feel better, right?
Progress,
Makes you
right? Yeah.
totally,
You have
totally.
to know that
So
that's happening. I think too, what's really important to like not specify, but like when you're talking rewards, and I want to be specific about this because like you said, going above and beyond. Like there's expectations and then there's going above and beyond. So like if my
yeah.
kids go and they play in a game and they do good, they give effort, but they don't do anything above and beyond. They don't go and make an extra tackle. They don't go and hustle. Like just little things. It shouldn't be the normal expected behavior. Those rewards
Mhm.
should come for that be above and beyond. I saw my son go over and pat his quarterback on the back, say, "Hey, it's all right, man. You got the next one." That's going above and beyond. That's taking what you're learning and going a step further, making yourself a better player and like exceeding my expectations. So like we're not saying you went to practice so you get a reward. It's
Yeah.
you went and worked your ass off and you're dripping sweat and pushed yourself harder than I've seen you push yourself in a long time. Let's go grab a nice coffee. Like that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tear it out. Like it doesn't need to be, like you said, it can be something small. It could be like, hey, let's go to the park for a little bit. Like you can go ride like on the swings, whatever it is, like depending on their
Mhm.
age. But it doesn't have to be something that costs money either. Sometimes all they want is like quality time, right? Like
Yep.
let's go sit in the jacuzzi tonight and like relax your muscles. Like it's the jacuzzi. Everybody loves the jacuzzi. So they think that that's like it's like a positive. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think it's important that they shouldn't get in. This is my opinion. I think it's how you feel too. Is like you're not going to get rewarded for expected behavior and for showing up and doing your job. you're going to get
Yeah.
a reward when you go above and beyond what I'm asking you to do.
Yeah.
Sports the same way in jobs, right? You're not going to get a bonus for doing your normal job. That's like your base salary. You're going to get bonuses and extra commission when you go above and beyond and close something big, or you do something extra, or you get that promotion. So those types of lessons, that's why they're so important, is because it's the same as it is in life.
Yep. Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a really good way to put it. Like, you know, and Maddie played basketball Sunday. She had 2 games, and game 1 was against a tough team, right? And like, it was the best that I've ever seen her play across the board. And I think it was a really cool moment because she guarded their best player. And it's not like she shut their best player down to 0 points, but the quality and attention to detail that she put into that piece, it was like a work of art. Like watching her move her feet and like it was just so cool for me to see. I freaking love basketball because it just brings this different focus to defense and offense, right? Like defense, I'm like, my job is to stop you, and offense is like, how do we as a team beat you? So I've always loved it because it brings this piece out. And I know, you know, we had 2 games that day, and she got hammered hard in the second game a couple times, like really hard. One time I thought she went down and broke her wrist. Like, it was just getting yanked and pulled, and just poor thing was having a tough day. And we got back to the house that night, and I was getting Audrey ready for bed, and it was probably like 8:00. And Andrew's like, I'm just going to go take Maddie to go get like, you know, a little like ice cream at Amazon Go. And it was just like a cool moment for him to be able to go connect with her.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, hey, you've had a hell of a day. You've worked really hard. And like, I think that was a moment that they were able to have. And I think sometimes with parenting, you know, as much as we always want to both be involved, and it's sometimes cool for one parent to get these opportunities and like, hey, I'm going to take her and I'll deal with Audrey. You go have your time with Maddie. Like, that was a special thing that he was able to do. Seems kind of cheesy. It's just ice cream, but she worked her ass off.
Yeah,
it did.
Yeah.
It did. So
There's a balance.
she tried to sneak it last night on the way home from practice. She had a 90-minute basketball practice, and then we had to go to softball hitting 7 to 9. And her and I are driving home. She goes, what do you think about that McDonald's cone? And I was like, dude, no, you do not get ice cream back to back. You didn't work hard enough today to get that. And as we drive by, she's just like, please. But I don't know. She thrives well with that stuff. Audrey's still kind of young at 8, but she's like me in that sense, where a little bit of like, if I do something that pushes me, what's it going to maybe get me? And I don't mind it. So
yeah. It's hard too, because it almost works. It's almost the same as those consequences too, because it's like you have to make sure that your consequences when you're like disciplining your kids are actually things that they care about. Because if you're taking away like something that they're like, well, fuck it, then you're kind of losing its effect. It's so funny because like they're all so different. Like, you know, even just with Maddie and Audrey, like they're just like complete opposites in everything that you deal with. It's like you can't just get one thing where it's like, oh, this is exactly how I know what to do here, and it's going to be great. And like with Penelope and Dominic, I feel like I know exactly what to take away from them. I know exactly what the consequence needs to be. I know what the rewards need to be too. With TJ, Theodore, I could lock that kid in the closet for a week and he wouldn't care. Like, he is so just like blasé, like, I don't give a fuck. Like, we tried to take, what did he, I don't remember what he did. He was in trouble. He was in big trouble. And Mike's like standing there, like stern talk with him, and like, you're not going to baseball this week. And he's like, you're not going to, he shrugged his shoulders. Sorry, I forget some people are listening, not watching. So he just like shrugged his shoulders. He's like, you're not going to Boy Scouts this week. He does the same thing. He shrugs his shoulders again. Then Mike goes, okay, well, I'm not sending you to school tomorrow. This kid lost it. Like, he loves school, right? Like, where does that come from? Because every kid's like, I get to stay home from school. And this kid lost it. Like, immediate tears. Like, it's just so funny because every kid is so different. And you have to figure out, like, what lever do I have to pull here to really get that desired behavior that we're looking for? But there's no handbook. Nope.
No.
Not at all.
Yes. It's definitely finding things that worked for you and testing them out to see if your kids are motivated by the same things.
Mm-hmm.
And I always, you know, I'm thankful that I went back to do that Olympic stuff because I feel like it gave me this different mentality of of just learning things that worked for me at an older age and things that didn't, right? Like I was a big like build a playlist girly, like
Mhm.
especially because I threw a lot by myself, like a
Yeah.
lot by myself throughout.
Music mattered. Yeah.
Like it matters, and I am such a believer in when you build these like motivating playlists. I love different things that will bring back a memory from back in time, or like, you know, throw on some like Notorious B.I.G. and some Biggie, and you just like get moving, or some college jams, stuff you listen to in college. Like when I go to the gym every day, like when they play music that reminds me of college, it just gives me this different like pep in my step. And I always am
Mhm.
like, yo, playlist on fire today. Just because, you know, it really does. Like music. So music is super big to me. So
Yeah.
that was always the driving force. I would bring my headphones to DBAT and I would get my playlist going. I'd have my bullpen written out, and then I would just like attack mentality because it made me feel fired up. Like when you're, and sometimes the hardest things are doing it when you don't have any of those, right?
Right.
So like also knowing that there were definitely times where I knew that if I lacked motivation, those were the days sometimes when I didn't, and force myself not to use any of the things. And that sounds super weird, but it's also like I was a lot older. I was in my, you know, early 30s trying to train for an Olympics throughout a COVID pandemic, not knowing if these Olympics were even going to happen. Like, okay, I got to really do things
Yeah. Be
outside of my
prepared.
comfort zone.
Yeah. For like
To
really random situations that we would never
have
expect
to.
to be in. Yeah.
And lacking motivation at its finest. So what's going to push me? Like what's going to continue to like excel me forward, going back to go throw, or going to go do this. And I've always loved that challenge for myself. So it's like learning how to put that on the kids and help them throughout that process. I was a big, this was me and this was UW stuff that I absolutely loved. I was a big punishment person.
Okay.
This is not for everyone, but like in order for me to maximize my bullpens under pressure, I would have to like hit quality spots in certain moments throughout a bullpen. And if I miss, I have to run. And then I would run and go run the morning track at Husky Stadium. And then I would jet back and I'd give myself a minute, and then I'd have to execute and hit that spot again. I loved that stuff because I think that there is something when there is a punishment on the line, sometimes you change your approach.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you take something off it. Sometimes you're like, shit, I got to hit the spot. So I have to do this. If I miss, so you throw it at 80% instead of balls to the wall. Like, let's just let it rip. And so that always gave me that extra bit of like, I've done hard stuff to myself. Like I've ran a lot. I have lifted a lot. And so those were always things. So like there's been times I don't make Maddie run that much, or the lessons that I work with go do crazy ass things. But there's times where I will challenge my lessons. And the first thing that they want to do is pump the brake on it because they're scared that they're going to have to do the punishment.
Right.
And so you start to learn the feel of these kids, of who likes that and who doesn't. And also like you're in a pretty tough ass position. Pitching is tough. You
Right.
want the ball in the biggest games. You have to know how to deal with the emotions that come your way. And if you can't deal with it, I don't know if this is kind of the right position for you. It's hard,
Yeah.
harder now than ever, as you know.
And it's so, because as pitchers, like you guys have to be so like you're not alone on the field, but a lot of times that punishment is an internal thing, like on yourself. Whereas like I think I was the type of person I'm with punishment too, but it was the threat of the rest of the team being punished for something that I was not doing. Right. I feel like that was like my big motivator is like, I'm going to run my ass off because if somebody sees me dogging it, I don't want to be the reason we have to run more.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things as a team player that like you have to work on your own, but like as a pitcher, like there's so much more that you have to work on your own. I feel like because, you know, defense, I'm not saying it's not hard, but you got to feel the ground ball, catch a fly ball like that. Like when you put it very like basically, like that's what you have to do. Throw the ball, all the things. But as a pitcher, you have to be on every single pitch. You know, it's just a different mindset. And I think, you know, it also carries into like your kids again, and just finding out what is going to keep them going, what's going to keep them moving, but also how are you going to keep them mentally in the place where they can understand that they're doing this for a reason, and that there's like a rhyme to all the reason. Like, we're not just doing this because we want to. Like, I don't want to be out here in the cold any more than you do, but
Yeah.
in the long run, it's what's going to make you stronger. But
it's God, I have fond memories of like us being on defense doing stuff at UW in like the tail end of January before we kick off season, and we're like fielding balls and doing 21 outs, and when you mess up, the whole team would get punished. I remember that. And there were times,
love that game.
there's times the ball's coming to me on like the 19th out, and I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
And I can't be thinking that when the ball's coming to me in the moment, like.
Bottom
But it was cool to feel. Yeah, it's cool to like feel that pressure. Pressure is a privilege. We work for it. I still in my day-to-day life push myself with that mentality because I don't think you ever take that hardcore competitive athlete out of those that were like, and sometimes I got to learn to pump the brakes on it, and that's okay. But like, I've just always been fueled by that, and I've loved that. And so that's always worked for me to have that fierce mentality. And kind of lastly for me, thinking about just things throughout the winter time, like outside of the pitcher, like kind of find your occasional workout buddy that you can text and be like, hey, you want to go to DBAT and you want to get some reps.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it doesn't have to be balls to the wall all the time. That's not what this podcast and this theme that we're talking about is about. It's like, sometimes you're going to have days where you go out and you kill it. And then sometimes you're going to go out and you're going to have days where you're like, dang, that was not great. But that not great is what I can check off because I did do that. So what did I get from it? What did I learn from it? I still put in reps and kudos to me, right? So go hit BP with someone. Go just to the cages and have someone that can put the ball on the tee. And then you can have someone throw you front toss and kind of help you through that, especially teammates throughout the process, right? Majority of the time we're around where all of our other teammates are. We're not on that point now in Maddie's softball career where everyone is all over the country and we just meet up for tournaments. We're not there. So I don't know. That definitely tends to help for the softball stuff. When it came to running and doing all that, I loved doing that on my own. College, we were so used to doing it with each other all the time. So but I don't know. I feel like when Maddie gets to go hit with her teammates and stuff, she lights up a little bit more than when she just has to go hit with her mom or her dad. And parents can plan that too, right? It doesn't just have to be your 12 or 13-year-old kid. Like I can connect with a parent on the team. Like, hey, let's get the girls together at DBAT. You want to meet at like 4:30? Let's get them some reps. They see them and they're like, oh man, Cam's hitting here today. Well, yeah, you guys are going to hit together. Awesome. She's excited.
Like a play date.
To play date
on steroids. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They get a lot out of it. I think that camaraderie and that like we're great as parents and coaches, but I think when they have that, that other player that's like they know is on their side and like is going through it with them, I think it motivates them in a different way for sure.
And Maddie gets competitive.
Yeah.
Like she gets competitive in a good way, even including when we go to DBAT and she's not with teammates. But if she seems to lack any motivation when we get there and we're in a cage next to someone that plays softball that's in and around her age, whoa, it gets way different. And sometimes I even have to look at her and be like, hey, dude, we can't just like amp up the motivation because you want to prove something to someone that's near us. We have to be able to carry this on all the time and feel that we want to get better. But at least I see it because when you get to cross the lines, whatever sport it is that you're playing, basketball, soccer, all the things, when you cross the lines, it's you versus me, right? In certain positions, certain moments. So for her to be able to kind of, you see that in practices with outside of her teammates where she amps that up a little bit, it makes me excited for when she does have to play in those games because that that's not lacking. That's going to be there and it's going to show up because it does. But sometimes when we go to the cages and there's two people there and it's just mom and me, it's a little bit harder to get going. And I get it because these kids they're tired, they're grinding. But at the end of the day, we can't want it more than our kids. Right. So we really have to know that the love is there, even on the days where it feels like they don't want to do it. You have to see a little spark when they are doing it. Right. Yeah. And there's times where we've had to do the hard lesson, over the break, we took her to the cage and Andrew's dad was there and all of a sudden, like, Andrew's hitting with her and it was just shitty. She just didn't want to be there. You could tell, like, swings were brutal, not listening. He's giving her adjustments and he's just like, yep, we're done. And then the tears start flowing and I'm sorry. And it's like, no, we're out, man. Like,
Yeah.
I can't continue to give you my time when you're not going to use it. And I'd rather be sitting at home on Christmas break. Like, and so she'll learn in those moments the buttons she can push and the ones that she can't too. And
what's tolerated and what's not. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, she's not going to get better just sitting here doing shitty reps. I'd rather like peace out and have a hard conversation with her. And I did on the way home. Like, hey, to go and hit for 30 minutes isn't that much time out of your day. I'm not asking you to go do a 3-hour practice with me, but it's just reminding them that like, it's okay to have a bad day, but the attitude and the effort are two things that we should be able to have the ability to control. So let's make sure when we feel those emotions, like Inside Out 2, when we feel those emotions, how can I deal with it? How am I able to process that without it seeming like it's just friggin' attitude right out of the gate? Because I get my back up when she's just coming at me or her dad. You know, I don't like that. So, you know, parents have their work cut out for them, but the sooner you can learn your kid throughout this process. Do they like it when you plan stuff? Do they like it when you're there with them? Do they like it when you set lessons up on their own? Like all the things. The sooner you figure that out, and then you're able to start to see them kind of move up on the scale of like, oh, this is great. I love this sport because it's dark right now. I have stuff to go do after this, and I'm like, dang, my body hurts. I don't want to do it, but like I'm gonna do it because that's what I do. You know, like it's just
just is what it is. Yeah. You just got to get it done. But well, thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate it and hope that you guys found some juicy tips and tricks for dealing with adversity when you can't really control, you know, exterior stuff, environment, stuff like that. And we'll be back at you next week. And we hope you guys have a good one.